Okay, welcome to the webinar, Getting Buckle Up Messages to Minorities. This webinar is sponsored by the Maryland Institute for Emergency Medical Services Systems and brought to you through funding by the Maryland Department of Transportation and its Highway Safety Office. I'm Susanna Gaitis-Jones, and I coordinate the Child Passenger Safety Healthcare Program here at MIMS. A couple of housekeeping details before I introduce our speakers. If you would, put your phones on mute so we don't hear any unnecessary noises. We will have time at the end for questions and answers, so save them until then. And there's also an evaluation form that would be really helpful if you could fill out at the end. I will send that to you, but it's also on our website. So let me get started by introducing our first speaker. Nicole Booker is currently serving as an Association of Schools and Programs of Public Health Fellow at the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, or NHTSA. Within the Occupant Protection Division, she supports the prevention of motor vehicle-related injuries and fatalities through traffic safety programs in seatbelts and child passenger safety. Nicole has a bachelor's degree from Florida International University in Health Services Administration and a master's of public health from Emory University's Rollins School of Public Health. She has a public health research interest in injury prevention and the socio-contextual determinants of health. Today, Nicole will be providing us with a public health perspective to engage minority communities in buckling up, as well as she will share some tools to help you get started. Nicole, you ready?
Hi. Yeah. Hello, everyone, and thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here and to begin this important conversation of engaging communities of diverse populations. So we can begin with the overview of the problem. And this is 2014 data that we're looking at, which is the most recently published. But in 2014, there were 21,022 occupants of passenger vehicles killed in motor vehicle traffic crashes. And now out of those fatalities, for when the restraint status was known, 49% of them were unrestrained at the time of the crash. And so this is a pretty, alarming statistic when we look at it. And now we're going to look at the, you all may be familiar with this. This is the 10 leading causes of injury deaths by age group. And I want to point out, we have the #1 unintentional injury death for ages 5 through 24 is actually motor vehicle traffic crashes. And it is also the second leading cause of death for ages 1 through 4, as well as 25 and above. So everyone here understands the urgency behind reducing motor vehicle crashes, injuries, and fatalities. And we also know that this is a preventable problem, that there is a way to mitigate this. And when we look into that, we know that seatbelts can be a huge part of the solution. So using a seatbelt on every trip is one of the most effective ways to prevent injury and death. We know that when used properly, lap and shoulder belts reduce the risk of fatal injury by up to 45%. In 2014, we estimated 12,802 lives were saved among passenger vehicle occupants 5 and older by using lap shoulder seatbelts. And when we're looking at the younger kids, child safety seats reduce the risk of fatal injury by 71%, and that's for 1 and younger. And it reduces the risk of fatal injury by 54% for toddlers, 1 to 4 years old in passenger cars. So we can see here that promoting proper restraint use, which includes seatbelts, child passenger safety seats, and boosters, can definitely help to mitigate this huge problem that we've identified. And so how are we doing on seatbelt use rates? What is the country looking like right now? This is from the National Occupant Protection Use Survey, otherwise known as NOPUS. And as you can see here, over the years, we've done a great job at increasing the national seatbelt use rate. The most latest report, we are reporting at 88.5% for 2015, but we aren't all the way there yet. So we have 11.5% that we still haven't reached yet. There's room for growth with this 11.5%, especially knowing that almost 50% of fatalities right now are completely unrestrained. So how do we reach this 11.5% of people? The gap is such an important gap. And so that's what we're going to try to talk to today. When you're looking at data, there's definitely ways to dive into it and look for disparities, look for at-risk populations. And so we've picked two very large disparities here on this slide. I know there's a lot of information, but starting with age, we can see that age groups have higher risks of fatal accidents than others. So the age group 13 to 15 and 25 to 34 actually have the highest percentage of all the age groups. 59% of them who were killed in traffic crashes were not using a restraint at all. Down to the second bullet, in 2014, there were 183 passenger vehicle occupant fatalities among children under 4. 22% were completely unrestrained. And then in the age group 4 to 7, out of the 213 fatalities, 32% of those were unrestrained. And unfortunately, when we're talking about children, those numbers, they actually get worse as they get older. And so moving on to a second disparity is looking at gender. So in 2014, almost twice as many male occupants were killed compared to their female counterparts. And additionally, when restraint use was known, 53% of male fatalities were completely unrestrained, which was about 13% higher than their female counterparts. So these are two large demographics that we can look at when we're kind of diving into the data of unrestrained fatalities. Another disparity that we can find when we're looking into demographics of the fatality data is a Hispanic disparity. So Latinos experience a disproportionate risk of dying or being injured in traffic crashes when you compare them to their non-Latino white counterparts. This is an important statistic because they're a large group that is continuously growing in this country. And 64.5% of fatally injured Hispanic youth, going back to age, ages 15 to 20 were completely unrestrained or otherwise incorrectly belted in a study done in 2011 by the CDC. And when we're talking about children, fatally injured Hispanic children aged 4 and younger are 35% less likely than white or Asian and Pacific Islander children to have used child safety seats. So these fatality statistics can be the result of many different things, including language barriers, legal status, long-held deep cultural norms, traditions, recent immigration status, and more. But the U.S. Census projects that the Hispanic population in the year 2060 will make up about 28.6% of the national population. And they're currently about 17.6%. So they are going to continue growing. It's definitely a population that we need to engage and engage quickly because there is a huge disparity within them. And this is consistent in CPS data as well, unfortunately. Another disparity that we will find if we dig into the data is among African Americans. So similar to Latinos, they also experience disproportionate rates of motor vehicle related fatalities and injuries. In 2013, more African Americans died from motor vehicle related injuries than any other unintentional injury. They're the leading, motor vehicle crashes is the leading cause of death for African American children aged 1 to 14. And as of 2013, on an observed survey, so just observing seatbelt use, they had a 81% regular belt use compared to the national observed statistic percentage of 87%. So they are performing, African Americans are performing lower than the national average. And then again, I want to point out that these disparities are also consistent with CPS restraint use. There is a national survey of the use of booster seats that did a survey in 2013 and reported that for children aged 4 to 7 years old, African Americans' child passenger safety restraint use was at 78%. Hispanic CPS restraint use was at 85%, but their white non-Hispanic counterparts was at 96%. So these, big disparities are consistent all the way down to child passenger safety. This is a quote from a race ethnicity study, or a race ethnicity fact sheet that was published in 2009. And it's basically calling out the necessity of looking at minority populations as they continue to increase in the country. It's essential to evaluate them and motor vehicle traffic fatalities, because it'll help to develop countermeasures that will reach each of these most at risk to help mitigate that death and injury in motor vehicle traffic crashes. So what is the key to working effectively in cross-cultural communities? What is important when you're working with groups of diverse origins and diverse norms and beliefs? Cultural competence is definitely an important step, and understanding and having a sensitivity to diversity is definitely going to be key for working with these types of communities. So I'm going to ask you guys to take a step back from the numbers and reflect a little bit about culture and what you define culture as and how it has shaped you. So we're going to go through a couple, pieces of it. Family structure is a huge part. If you think about your personal family structure and what it was like when you were younger, the norms that you share within your life, your family, your loved ones, you may all have missions and goals that you share. This is all shaping your environment. It's where you came from, what you teach your children. You have shared attitudes. You share information. You pass information down to each other. The history, your family lineage. You have rituals. And this kind of all comes together and creates who you are today and how you make decisions and your environment and how it influences you and how you make those decisions. I have a definition from the community toolbox that says culture refers to a group or community which shares common experiences that shape the way its members understand the world. It includes groups that we are born into, such as race, national origin, gender, class, or religion. It can also include a group we join or become a part of. For example, it's possible to acquire a new culture by moving to a new country, a change of economic status, or by becoming disabled. If we think of culture this broadly, we realize that we all belong to many, many different cultures. And I would argue that everyone, in this meeting right now is an active participant in safety culture. So we all develop in some type of culture. Our environment determines what we learn, how we learn it, the rules for living with the people around us, and then we transmit them from one generation to the next. And they're often adapted and kind of changed by the times and locale. So why is this important? Why should we care? Why should you acknowledge that there's differences between, my family and your family, my holiday traditions and yours? Why should we be respectful? Well, we're all here to bring communities together, to send out a safety message, and these large numbers of people need to all be on the same page. And so we need it. We need to be respectful. We need to be sensitive so that we can do this. And each cultural group has unique strengths and perspectives that we can all benefit from. So capitalizing on this, bringing people all of different, beliefs into one room and having a constructive conversation is actually beneficial. And lastly, understanding cultures, it helps you overcome any divisions that may be existing in your community. Continuing on, you need to be able to understand your end user. So programs and policies will not be affected without a sensitive consideration of the differences in culture and beliefs. When you appreciate culture and diversity, you have justice and equitable society. And we also want to recognize and give an accurate view of our society and our communities. And we can't do that without understanding and being sensitive to the differences within them. So we have diversity. And diversity is definitely a reality. Considering our rapidly increasing population, it is a fact of life. In addition, diversity is very valuable. As I mentioned before, it can be a rich resource of alternative ideas, solutions. We can't continue to solve new problems without new dynamic, in-depth solutions. And it's necessary. Diversity is definitely something that we need to move forward. And inclusion in some cases is, a lack of inclusion in some cases is not only wrong, it's illegal, but we cannot discriminate based on gender, race, ethnicity, or disability. We need to be inclusive. How do we connect cultural competence to traffic safety and occupant protection efforts? I'm going to go over a couple tools that are actually available to you right now, so you can take action as soon as possible. I'm going to talk about a Hispanic Buckle Up Toolkit that was done between a co-op between NHTSA and the National Latino Children's Institute. And the objective of this project was to kind of identify the attitudes and practices of recently emigrated Latinos regarding motor vehicle occupant restraint use, and kind of determine that, use that to determine messages and strategies to get them to buckle up every trip, every time. So 2 focus groups were held, and they were intentionally held in 2 different states. One was held in Maryland, and they were targeting the Mexican descendants. Another one was held in Florida, and they were targeting Central and South American descendants. So there was a particular emphasis on capturing the different subcultures within the Hispanic population. And I think that's a super important distinction, that recognizing and being sensitive to that Latino population can be Mexican, can be Panamanian, South American, and they may hold differences within them. So from the 2 focus groups, a community-based toolkit was made. These are the findings. So the findings were that Latinos were not accustomed to using seatbelts in their countries of origin, and few had even used them before moving to the United States. They felt that it was unnecessary unless they were driving long distances, and many of them responded that they use public transportation. They're more likely to walk or use a bicycle or a bus. And so a personal vehicle, wasn't their main mode of transportation. And lastly, a huge motivator for seatbelt use was family. There's a huge theme of the importance of family within the Latino culture. So these were very important findings, and from this, the Buckle Up Toolkit was created. It is a PSA, and it's Do It For Your Family, Buckle Up, and in Spanish it's Hágalo por su familia, aproveche el cinturón. And inside this toolkit, there are bilingual brochures, stickers, posters. There is a PowerPoint presentation that's completely bilingual. There is a radio PSA and a video PSA. We also have an African American Buckle Up Toolkit, and this was actually done this year. This was an update to a previously existing toolkit that was on the NHTSA website. And so what you're looking at is a kind of how to use this toolkit document, and it goes over the action steps. So we're actually telling people how they can help. You can promote and distribute the components of the toolkit at community events. You can incorporate them into the health and safety initiatives at your organization. If you already have a health and wellness day or fair at your job, you can use the toolkit components and kind of infuse them into your already existing initiatives. We ask people to download, print, post them around in your community board, in your kitchen, and your staff areas. You can conduct a seatbelt survey, which is interesting. If you conduct a small survey, it's very easy, and you just stand at your parking garage or you stand at your entrance of your parking lot and kind of take a survey of the total cars, of the cars who were belted and who were not belted. And the numbers can be, surprising when you do that. You can mark your calendars and align with national efforts like Click It or Ticket campaigns. You can align it with seatbelt campaigns, child passenger safety awareness. You can also post it on your website. Post it on your website, put it in your newsletter, send it out with your monthly updates, your weekly updates. There's, a lot of different ways that you can use these components of the toolkit and kind of infuse them into your organization. So I'm going to go through a couple of the pieces of the toolkit. This is an IQ test, which is a fun way of kind of quizzing yourself on the knowledge surrounding African American seatbelt use. So there's a couple of questions. You can take the test. The answers are on the back. We also have a PowerPoint, and within the PowerPoint are a couple pop quiz questions. And then we have infographics and fact sheets. These are kind of like just a couple screenshots of them. but they're very colorful. They've all just been updated, and they just point to the necessity of engaging the African American community. And these are very easy to download right off the internet, print them out, hand them out, use them to spark a conversation, to talk about the culture around buckling up, to talk about the disparity, to talk about the lives that are currently being lost just due to not buckling up. So these are the components of the seatbelt, or the African American Buckle Up Toolkit. There's the quiz I mentioned, the IQ quiz, the one-page infographic. There's 4 fact sheets, and there's e-blasts that are kind of, you just fill in the blank with your organization and you send out the message. And then the educational PowerPoint I also mentioned. Oh, and 2 buckle up logos. So I'm going to show you guys where you can get this information, and that is at nhtsa.gov. Both toolkits are right on the home page. I circled them for you. And along with them are Buckle Up America campaign, Click It or Ticket campaign, child car seat safety. And I also want to point out on the right-hand side, you can find the newest published research on seatbelts and occupant protection. So all of those statistics that I went over, any new surveys that are being conducted by NHTSA, you can find a lot of that on the right-hand side of this page. So this is definitely a website you want to reference. And like I said, the Hispanic Buckle Up Toolkit and African American Toolkit can be found here. Another, I guess, recommendation I'd like to give you all when you're engaging in your community is to know your state's statistics. It's a great place to start. I got this from the CDC, the CDC's motor vehicle safety page. So if we look at Maryland, I don't know if you're aware, but Maryland performed better than the national average in observed seatbelt use in 2012, which is a great statistic to know. There's also information on the back of this form that gives you strategies to increase belt use, which includes like primary laws. It talks about car seat and booster increase use as well. So I just wanted to share this with you guys as a key conversation starter, just to know your state, know your statistics, how they're performing. And like I said, this is a resource from the CDC. Moving on, another ways to engage your community. Developing a baseline measure. I spoke about doing a seatbelt survey, like at your job or your school, your community. I mean, you can say Maryland's at 91% compared to the national average, but what about my school? What about my job? What about my community? It's very, very easy. Just conduct a local survey, observe a certain amount of cars from this time to that time. It's very simple. Publish the results and start a conversation about it. Another strategy would be to look for personal testimonies. Look for a survivor, an advocate that would be willing to share their story and help again start the conversation. And seek partnerships. Look for local chapters of organizations that have similar goals and safety initiatives. And a couple examples would be your local Safe Kids chapter, AAA. I'm from Florida, outside of Orlando, so I think Disney, YMCA. You can look for local restaurants, any type of community organization that would be invested in giving you some support for seatbelt use within your community. Okay, I'm going to do a slide about social media, which some people can be a little intimidated about. But my advice is that this is one of the best tools to engage your community. So maintaining a social media presence is like, it'll increase your exposure for your organizations. It's a valuable tool. You can engage directly with your community and audience. And the more you engage, the more you learn, you more about them. So I have someone I follow on Twitter that conducts Twitter polls all the time, which actually you actually answer questions, and then you're able to see, like, in real time from everyone who answered the questions how everyone felt. So a Twitter poll is one way to like directly engage with your followers, get feedback from them, and it's all in real time, which is great. Another recommendation is to credit responders, tag people, use people's names, call them out and say thank you for your comments, thank you for your support. You use images and emojis and use hashtags. Hashtags are great to carry your message on. You can use them with images under your message. And also encouraging people to like, share, and forward your message is also a great way to get your message out to the community. Here are a few other resources I wanted to leave with you all. So trafficsafetymarketing.gov is actually a branch off of NHTSA, and that's where all of the campaign materials can be downloaded at. So that's Click It or Ticket campaign materials, the African American Toolkit, the Hispanic Toolkit, child passenger safety material can all be found at that first link at trafficsafetymarketing.gov. The second one is the community guide, and this is from the CDC. It's a free resource. It helps you choose programs and policies, but it's based off of like systematic reviews that they're heavily evaluated interventions for effectiveness. So that's a very solid resource. That I use often to go to for interventions and knowing what works, knowing what doesn't work. The third link is the CDC's National Center for Injury Prevention and Control. They have fact sheets, data, seatbelt use maps, policy information, and they even have a Pinterest account on safe driving, which is really interesting, and a great source for images and also easy to share on social media. And the last link is the Community Toolbox. And this is a free online resource for those working to build healthier communities and bring about social change. It's a working group from Community Health and Development at the University of Kansas. And this is they actually are the ones that I took the definition of culture from. It's a great resource. There's very dense with information and strategies and cultural diversity information. So, I mean, these are 4 of many resources. These are the ones that I use often. But I definitely advise to take a look, check back for new surveys, new research, and yeah, definitely utilize them when you're coming up with programs. So that is all I have for you all. I think we might try to play the video one more time, but here's my contact information. If there's any questions I can answer, any follow-up information needed, you can email me at nicole.booker.ctr@dot.gov.
Our next speaker is probably familiar to most of you, as she's so involved in child passenger safety all around Montgomery County, the state of Maryland, and even all across the country. I'm speaking, of course, of Emily Crown. Emily was formerly an emergency nurse, and now she coordinates Safe Kids Montgomery County on behalf of Montgomery County Fire and Rescue, and she runs their car seat program there. She'll speak on what they have done in her area to reach their Hispanic communities. Emily?
Okay, thank you very much for that gracious introduction. And I really have to say that I think we need to do so much more, and after listening to Nicole, I've got an even longer to-do list. But in case any of this will be helpful to any of you, I just wanted to go over what we are personally, or what we are doing now in Montgomery County. And I do have to say that if I look back over the last 20 years, some of my most personally rewarding and exhausting events did involve minority populations, because we often feel that almost 100% of the families needed something and we needed to help them. There's still so much more to do, but here's what we're doing at the moment. For a long time, we've had a dedicated Spanish hotline number that one of my car seat technicians who speaks Spanish monitors every 2 or 3 days. He takes off the voicemails and calls people back. And we have also had flyers and handouts, and of course our charts that we use at seat checks we have in both English and in Spanish. And we have hosted for the last probably 5 or 6 years targeted events to the Hispanic community. And my most valuable resource is the Spanish-speaking technician. It's been very, very, very helpful. At the moment, I only have 5 Spanish-speaking technicians with Montgomery County Fire Rescue, and Fitzgerald Auto Malls that we work with very closely has a couple others that are fluent in Spanish, and they have been a huge resource. I am talking on this slide about the Hispanic community a great deal, but of course I want to point out that we have a very diverse community. So we have people who are French speakers and Russian speakers and lots of other diverse and minority populations as well. And I think a lot of this is going to cross all those boundaries. And as Nicole mentioned earlier, we have found that these groups do place great emphasis on family, and they often arrive with their families and their extended families. And so when I talk about the questions that we ask when we set up car seat check events and appointments with these people, we ask a couple additional questions because of this. So the one thing I do want to point out on our flyers, as much as possible, we try to have one flyer with both English and Spanish, for example. So our inspection station flyers where people can go to set up an appointment, and the address and the times and the number to call to set up the appointment, that will be in English on one side and Spanish on the other. And I typically use the Safe Ride News fact sheets. I figure why reinvent the wheel? They're so good. And so again, any of those that are single-sided, I try to do Spanish on one side and English on the other, so that we always have both, because I might think that I'm going to be to a predominantly English-speaking community, and then invariably I need Spanish or vice versa. So those are some of the key things that we're doing, and I'm going to talk more about the targeted event to the Hispanic community in just a moment. Again, this is one of my Spanish-speaking technicians, Chris Hernandez, been extremely helpful, and he's also the one that answers the hotline number for Spanish. One of our happy recipients for a voucher car seat in the middle. And one of my favorite slides, this is from Safe Kids Day last spring, and it always amazes me how happy children are to stand on scales. I don't know why that just doesn't follow through when they get older, but they just love having their weights and their heights taken. And this past week at the Montgomery County Fair was no exception. People just love to stand on the scale and figure out how much they weigh. This was an event that we did coordinated with the YMCA. So another thing that we use is, it's called the Spanish Flipbook Reference Guide. It was developed by the Kansas Traffic Safety Resource Office and AAA and the Kansas Department of Transportation. And it's just a book that has multiple pictures showing everything you could possibly want to explain about a car seat, about bulky coats, about how tight the harness strap should be, what latch is, what a tether is, what a belt path is, and so on. And it has the description in both English and Spanish, but the picture is really what shows what you're trying to show. So we use this a lot, and we have used this with non-Spanish speakers as well. It's very helpful to have pictures. So I think it's a great resource. Our website for about 8 years now has had English and Spanish information under our FAQs, under the Maryland law, under our inspection station flyers, under the fact sheets that we have posted on the website. There is both an English and a Spanish side to it. As with anything else, the difficulty is remembering to always update it every year when something changes on a flyer, to get the new flyer out there. The public will be certain to tell you if you've got 2014 dates for car seat checks out in 2016 and so on. And likewise with the Spanish hotline, if a Spanish technician happens to want to take a family vacation or something, then that's always an issue on how we're going to deal with that. So when you have something, you do need to monitor it and update it. Now, some of our partnerships, Fitzgerald Auto Malls has been a huge partnership in terms of hosting monthly open seat check events. Pretty much everything we do in the county is by appointment only, so we have the correct number of technicians at the event and we don't get overwhelmed. But once a month on the third Thursday, we have an event with Fitzgerald Auto Malls in Rockville, and anybody can come who lives anywhere with any number of seats, and they will be served because there are so many different technicians from multiple agencies, They come not just from the fire department and the emergency departments and police departments, but from all over the state have come to that event. Not to mention the many, many technicians that Fitzgerald Automall has put through the certification program. So those are great events. We have worked with Early Head Start on a couple of Safe Kids smaller grants talking about child passenger safety, getting into the schools, instructing the teachers on lesson plans, things they can tell the students, getting into the back to school nights. It's hard to get into the schools oftentimes, but if you have a contact and you have a specific mission, it can happen. And whenever we've done that with elementary schools or with Early Head Start, and we've had somebody translating what we're saying to the family members involved, it has been very, very rewarding. It takes twice as long because you say everything twice, but I have found that, again, this very family-focused group of people is very, very interested, and they want nothing more than to have their children be safe. So those PTA meetings have been very helpful. At one point when we had to distribute some booster seats with a grant or some seats that were provided to us by Maryland Kids and Safety Seats, we decided to go to a very needy school, and they were having a day where the parents, apparently these students needed to have their families come in. I think it was once a month to get educated and updated on something about child rearing and safety and good nutrition and multiple topics. And so we chose one day to talk about booster seats, and we distributed the booster seats to the families at the end of the event. And that was incredibly heartwarming. It was just a wonderful event. And Casa of Maryland, they, for example, contacted me just this past week after the horrific fire and explosion in Silver Spring, wanting to know, did I have any car seats, used car seats, anything to help some of these families who had lost everything. And I know some people initially thought, well, but it was an apartment that exploded. Why are you talking about car seats? They didn't lose their cars. But many of these people, as Nicole was, just mentioned, take public transportation, or they had rear-facing only seats in their apartment that they were carrying their children around in, and now they didn't have any of that. So I only had about 13 seats that I had washed and scrubbed and checked for recalls and parts and all of that, and they were just so appreciative to be able to get those seats. So again, it's great when you can work with some of these partnerships. And then whenever we have events like the Fitzgerald event that I'm about to go into detail with, we get the Spanish media involved. So whether it's Univision or Telemundo or whatever, we've used them all. They really promote the event and talk about the importance of child passenger safety. And so that's very helpful. Now, when we're scheduling appointments, we're all used to asking about the child's age and weight and what vehicle's coming to the appointment. And I've stressed for a long time how many children ride in this vehicle, you know, who else normally rides in the car. But for this population, I always ask, and will others be at this appointment with you? Because frequently, because they often take public transportation, they don't have a vehicle, so they're coming with their sister, and their sister also has 3 kids, and they have 2 kids. So next thing you know, you've got 5 car seats. And if you want to be able to be very helpful at a car seat check event, you need to know this in advance so you can block off the correct amount of time. So we ask a lot of questions, not because we care whether we're checking 1 seat, 2 seat, or 5 seats, but because it's really important to know who's going to be there. And to stress the importance of letting us know if who's going to be there changes or the vehicle that they're coming in changes. Because as you all know, life happens, and you know, somebody will come out and there'll be a flat tire in the morning, and then a neighbor will take them, and then that neighbor has 4 kids instead of the 2 kids that the sister was going to have, and you can just imagine. So that is one bit of advice that I would give you that I've learned from the doing this. So it's also really nice to know who else will be at this appointment with them in case there are some people that do speak English. Because if I have my Spanish technician making the appointment, they often ask that just so that we know if we need to allow extra time because we're going to be using the flip book and struggling, or if they have somebody who's very fluent and can talk and translate for us. And very often we've had other people at the car seat checks jump right in to, oh, well, I speak Spanish, can I help you? And they stay an extra half hour too. It's amazing how everybody tries to work together. So a little bit more about the large event. This is Claire Meyer from Maryland Kids and Safety Seat over on the right, and a lot of Spanish speakers that were greeting people and helping when they came in the lower center. A truck full of seats on the upper center, and then of course Minnie Mouse and Jack Fitzgerald and Mickey Mouse too. We also have Dora the Explorer. We've had numerous characters. And at these events we also have music and insurance companies and car information in addition to the seat check. And what's happened in years past is that a television stations such as Univision or Telemundo or somebody will have, say, something on their website where if somebody would like to get a free car seat or needs a car seat, they enter in some information, the child's weight and age, and then it's a lottery. So if they get, sent the certificate or told their winner, they show up. And believe me, they all show up. And so we have X amount of seats, might have 100 seats or 75 seats or whatever, depending on the year, and they show up to get their seats installed. Now, of course, they always show up with lots of other children in the car as well. They might be getting a seat for their 3-year-old, but they might also have some infants and 5-year-olds and 6-year-olds. It was extremely rare to have a vehicle with just one child in it. Last year's event was well over 200 seats were checked at this event. We distributed just under 100, but there were an additional 100 seats in the cars that got checked. Every lane was set up with an interpreter and a technician or two, and it was just, if you ever want to see 3 or 4 hours fly by, come to this event. This year's fall event has been rescheduled it's going to be next spring. We just could not get the date to work for everybody that needed to be involved this fall. But contact the folks at Maryland Kids and Safety Seats, myself, or anybody if you're interested. This is an event you will never forget if you attend, and it will fly by. But it is just incredible how appreciative the people are, and we're starting to fine-tune it. Fitzgerald's has been having car seat check events now since 1999 and have checked over 47,000 seats at just their location alone. They've been doing these events now for 5 or 6 years. We get better every year, but it is really something else, and I'm all ears for suggestions on ways we can make it more efficient. But anyway, I think it's important to work with everybody. It's the key is having people who speak Spanish, having the television stations and the radio stations get out the word. This event was held in Gaithersburg for the last several years, and many of these television stations were in downtown DC, and many of these people came from all over the metro area, and they all found their way to Gaithersburg on a Saturday morning. And they couldn't have been more appreciative and patient waiting in these lines, but we've gotten smarter. We've now have the people show up about an hour before the seat check is to start to try to get all these cars sort of prepped and ready with the right seats in them, because we just couldn't figure out any logistical way to get the proper seats if we tried to do it once they got up in the seat check area. And we also learned that it's helpful to take all the seats out of boxes and be all ready in that regard as well. So that's kind of what we do. I have a huge to-do list, and after listening to Nicole, a much longer to-do list. And I hope I haven't forgotten anything that we do and haven't offended anybody in Montgomery County, but that's it. Here's one happy father in the back with his 3 children in a pickup truck who we spent over an hour getting all secured, and he was so proud of himself at the end, and he wanted his picture taken.